Hello and welcome to the Geeks Review. I'm Royce.
I'm Joshua.
Today is Thursday, the 12th of March 2020, which means tomorrow is Friday the 13th. You know what that means? It's time to review the classic horror Halloween.
I thought we were reviewing Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street.
No, of course, it's Friday the 13th, so we're going to talk about Friday the 13th, a slasher classic that celebrates its 40th anniversary this year.
Holy crap.
Following the immense success of John Carpenter's Halloween, director Sean S. Cunningham was one of the countless directors who sought to capitalise on the slasher genre's success. The film stars Adrienne King as survivor Alice, Betsy Palmer as the villainous Pamela Voorhees, and a young Kevin Bacon as a Kevin Bacon-esque character.
He's not really there for the plot, he's just there to die.
The plot starts in 1958 at Camp Crystal Lake, where two teenage camp counsellors are slaughtered by a killer, the camera from their point of view, before jumping to 1979 to see the attempts to revive the camp following the tragedies from a new group of camp counsellors who are all killed off once again. The classic film doesn't feature Jason, it features Pamela Voorhees. I think it's not really a spoiler.
It's not a spoiler, it's not a twist, and if you haven't seen Friday the 13th, what's wrong with you?
So what are your thoughts on this film?
It and Halloween set up the cliches and beats that many slashers would follow. The kills are what you're here for. The visceralness, the gore factor, oh my god, how could they get away with that? And just some of them are so well done, particularly my three favourites being the fellow whose corpse was just chucked on top of the double bunk beds, where Kevin Bacon and another character were
Getting intimate
on the lower bunk, Kevin Bacon then getting pierced by an arrow from underneath and not let fly, slowly being pushed up.
Driven through the mattress and his neck. It's
And then finally my favourite, the archery range.
Yes, the guy who's pinned to the door. I think in comparison to Halloween, this is one of the stronger entries.
Yes.
Or it's definitely the one that endured the most because I guess it's the name, Friday the 13th, is so evocative. It's like Halloween, it's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's strong and it grabs your attention and your imagination. And there is a lot of preamble to this. You are kind of waiting for the kills. You're waiting for the villain to show up. And not to say they don't try, but I just didn't connect completely with the characters.
You're not supposed to. They're there to die. They're there to show the moral Christian values of the film. Don't have premarital sex. Don't do drugs.
That's really a trope of the whole slasher genre in a way.
It is.
And it could arguably have been started with John Carpenter's Halloween, which I'm a massive fan of. But I think with that was never really the intention. And
it was just Michael going around
killing because he could.
Well, not because he could, but because, I haven't taken the time yet to study Michael Myers as a character.
I have, and there's a lot of interpretations. But we're talking about Friday the 13th here. But I think in comparison with the characters like the survivors you get in Halloween, like Laurie and Nancy and Annie, not Nancy, sorry.
Nancy's a different franchise.
Yes. Well, even Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street. There's not as much connection here. I don't really know. The series does get its own, favourites like Tommy Doyle or Chris Higgins from Part 3.
Yep.
But they're not the most strongest and they're not the most compelling. I remember watching Halloween only for the first time a few years ago and being legitimately scared any time Annie was moving around the house thinking Michael's going to jump out and get her. But he doesn't. And of course, you could say it's boring, but it's about tension and that's what this film is about. And I think
this film does, Friday the 13th, the original does build tension, but you're more or less waiting to see the reveal of the killer. You're waiting to see that it is Mrs. Voorhees, and even then slowly watch her turn on a dime where you go, oh, okay, she's just kind of a woman. She's coming here to save Annie. No, she's psychotic. She's doing it all.
Apparently, Betsy Palmer hated the role and sort of resented it. Understandably so, I guess. But she doesn't sleepwalk through this. It's really creepy, and she's sort of her son Jason, who was this poor boy born with birth defects, who was killed by negligence due to camp counsellors back in the 50s, and she sought revenge upon any camp counsellor that came her way, and was, I guess, possessed or mad, talking to the spirit of Jason, driving her to kill, at least within this film. And she does it really well. She's really formidable.
Absolutely.
Especially when you see all the stuff that she does and you realise that was this old woman who... Well, she's not even that old, but this was this woman who did it. all this horrible stuff. She must have been in her late 40s, mid 40s.
They're holding a grudge for about 12 years.
Longer than that.
Because Jason died in 57, and the first kills were in 58.
Yes. And then this film takes place in 1979.
Yep.
Or released in 1980, I should say, because the timeline gets a bit messy. We'll go into that in a little while. The effects were done by this guy called Tom Savini, who's kind of a legend in regards to horror effects and prosthetics. He designed the iconic look for Jason. The film really glorifies the violence. Like, it really shows it off because it's sort of proud. It wants to shock. It wants to terrify you because, in comparison, Halloween was quite tame with its blood and gore.
It was a much lower budget. I would wager that while Friday the 13th had maybe a similar budget, they did a lot more with it.
Yeah. I think in modern scenarios, some of the effects don't hold up as well. Like the neck piercing, it's quite obvious that it's a prosthetic because the skin tone doesn't match perfectly.
No.
But if you're watching that like on a drive-in cinema screen, and
I can imagine the reactions.
That would have been like, oh my god! Or if you're watching it on a VHS, which is not standard definition, it's potato definition. That stuff just blends in. It doesn't matter, that it's not perfect. No. Of course, it's like I said, it's still got its charm, but it somewhat loses the magic.
It loses its allure when you look at this from 40 years later and go.
You look at the remake, which came out about 30 years after the original, which I haven't seen.
I haven't either.
But I've seen scenes from it, and it really ramps up the horror elements, the tension, the violence, the gore.
Here, it's a suspenseful thriller.
The 70s were really like an amazing time for film in regards to experimentation. I mean, you got Star Wars, you got Jaws, and these films which were drawing massive crowds, and they had that tension. And then, as a modern audience member, you can look back and go, it's a bit slow. It's a bit like ho-hum, waiting for the stuff.
It's a short film. It's a 93-minute film.
Yeah, it's really quick. It does feel long in places though, because you are just waiting.
Because the first kill isn't technically done like amongst the campers until maybe just after the halfway point.
Yeah.
The first one to die, I can't remember her name. See, they're all faces at this point.
Yeah.
If you're in a Friday the 13th movie and you're not going to be the final sole survivor, you're just a face.
Yeah, precisely. I think they did sort of fix that. But again, I sort of look at Halloween, which was, really what this was trying to compete with.
Yep.
And Halloween's quite a short film as well. It's like only 100 minutes long or something. But
it's probably just a little bit longer. Maybe a little bit shorter.
But it does feel quite long in places thanks to that tension and that steady build-up.
But you're also comparing, and this is me, you're comparing apples to oranges. Carpenter is a different behemoth of a director than, say, every man that's been behind Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
I'm a Carpenter fanboy. You can't just
for sure. Yeah. The two. I think this is really strong, and it definitely laid the foundations for an amazing series that sort of came from that, which had its highs and its lows. It became mostly lows.
Parody of itself in the long run. This is this great beast of a machine that slowly just turns into that. Okay. Snooze fest.
Yeah. This film was criticised when it came out. Roger Ebert, famous film critic, he criticised this film for saying it would make the audience empathise with the killer. So, and I think Ebert's also gone on to say that like movies are empathy machines. They allow you to see different viewpoints and understand different feelings and different thoughts you might not necessarily have.
With Mrs. Voorhees.
No, I mean, I think that's maybe I don't know, maybe that's sort of an old world thing, moral panic.
You're crazy and you're killing people because your son drowned. Alright, I get that you're entitled to some retribution, but have you not heard of the judicial system?
Yeah. So I think that claim that, you're going to empathise with Pamela Voorhees, I've never seen anyone say, Pamela was right all along.
No.
Or, I mean, there's fans of Jason, fans of Pamela, but they realise they're killers.
Yeah.
They're psycho killers, and they're not good people.
And that's all they like them for, is that they're psychotic killing machines, and Jason's the supernatural being that'll just keep coming back.
Now, a lot of people might be wondering, where's Jason, the hockey mask-wearing, machete-wielding killer this series is famous for? Well, following Pamela's demise, Jason was resurrected from his watery grave for the sequel. He allegedly survived that drowning and sought revenge on the camp counselors and its many sequels, like any camp counselor would do.
Yeah.
Didn't discriminate, just like, you were here 40 years after the fact, you're guilty. So part 2 sees the sole survivor, Alice, who kills Pamela at the end, cuts her head off, be butchered by Jason in the opening minutes. She just wiped out entirely.
This is, if I remember correctly, part 2, he was wearing a bag over his head. He hadn't adopted the classic look.
After that intro, which still took place in 1979, the series jumps ahead, the film then jumps ahead to 1984. keep in mind this film came out in 1981.
Yeah.
And Jason, he's wearing a sack over his head to cover his deformed face, running around, chopping people up left and right. There's a great kill where he hits this guy in a wheelchair in the face with a machete, and he bounces down these stairs in the rain at night. It's morbid. It definitely don't condone it. No, don't do that to you.
But it's still funny.
It's still really funny. But yeah, it wasn't until part 3 where he got his hockey mask, and at the end of that film, the survivor, Chris Higgins, this lady, hits him in the head with an axe and gives it this split, which remains throughout the series. It's kind of an iconic part of his mask. Part 3 and 4 technically don't actually take place on Friday the 13th. They all take place the day after each other. So part 3 came out in 83 or 82, and then part 4 came out in 1984. So the series finally sort of caught up with its release dates and its actual in-universe thing. So part 2, 3, and 4 are kind of like a massive movie showing a really bad week in Jason's life as he goes and kills a bunch of people, a lot of people. He's got the most kills, I think, of a lot of...
I think you'd have one of the highest monster slasher film body count.
After that, Jason was killed, but the franchise kept going. It was incredibly successful, and they continued to make films through the 80s and 90s, culminating in a copycat killer, Jason revived as a vengeance-seeking zombie, Jason travelling to New York, hell, and space in the future, having a showdown with Freddy Krueger in 2003 and a reboot in 2009. The series has remained stagnant, and there's always sort of been plans for, a reboot or a revamp or a continuation. It never comes, but the series still lives on in the hearts of fans. So that's our kind of review of Friday the 13th as a whole.
You speak of Jason as a revival being something. What did you say that they labeled him as again?
As a Deadite. Yeah. This is a villain from the Evil Dead series made by Sam Raimi.
Yes. Released in 1987.
Oh, yes, we're going to talk about our favourite horror movies now.
Yes.
So, Evil Dead, this is the classic one, is it?
Oh, I've reviewed both the first and second film because they are the same film. You just need to edit out certain parts of the first film and it blends seamlessly into the second film. You just got to cut off Ash arriving at the cabin again with Linda.
Yeah, because
his girlfriend.
They didn't have the rights to the first film footage, so they had to reshoot and essentially told a condensed version of that first film in the opening 10 minutes.
This is my favorite horror film to date. It is hilarious. It is gory, and these effects, despite some of them not aging well, have held up and stood the test of time. Sam Raimi, God amongst horror men.
The first film is quite horrific, isn't it?
It is very gory. It's very iconic in moments, particularly with, and I'm not going to beat around the bush, we have Ash's sister, Linda.
Attacked by trees.
Defiled by trees.
Yeah, kind of that one.
Yeah.
I really cringe at the pencil in the ankle scene.
Yes.
That is just, But the Evil Dead 2 is a whole other beast.
It's a different beast, but it still continues on and sets up what the Evil Dead will become in the future. Because this is a film series that had 3 films, 1 remake, with a 4th one apparently on the way.
Oh, no way.
Directed by Sam Raimi.
Oh, wow.
Sadly, Bruce Campbell not set to return as Ash Williams. And 3 seasons of a TV show called Ash vs. the Evil Dead, which continues the themes,
the story,
the style,
yeah,
and story of the Evil Dead 2, and only referencing the third film, The Army of Darkness, because again, that's another film Sam Raimi doesn't have rights to, surprisingly.
Wow, okay.
But he can still sort of go, it might have happened.
It's really cool in a way that it started off such violent, almost the most disturbing horror you could do, and then by the end it's comedic action and adventure. It's
still horror. Watching this film, I see Bruce Campbell, hail to the king, always. Hail to the chin. This man is the king of B films, and that's what The Evil Dead is. It is a B film done beautifully, because the difference between the first Evil Dead and the second Evil Dead is the budget. That's it.
Yeah.
Just the budget difference. One is larger, one is a little bit more. The first one might have been filmed at certain parts in Raimi's garage, the other one not. The first half of this film, until other characters start interacting with Ash, is just Ash slowly losing his mind. And it's done so beautifully by Bruce Campbell, One of my favorite scenes is he's attacked by his girlfriend. His girlfriend's come back as this deadite. He lops off her head with a shovel. Again.
Yeah.
She bites his hand. He puts her in a vice.
Yeah.
Grabs a chainsaw and cuts her head in half.
Jeez.
Walks back into the cabin going, I'm fine. I'm fine. Looks at the mirror. The reflection strangles him, going, we just chopped off our girlfriend's head and then cut it in half with a chainsaw. We're not fine. Then cuts off his hand, screaming, who's laughing now, as his hand tries to kill him.
Possessed by the evil spirit.
He starts laughing.
Oh, what can you do?
As this deer head starts laughing at him because it's possessed, the furniture starts laughing, and it's just, this is Bruce, this is wacky. I, again, will always full-heartedly recommend the Evil Dead series, movies, any other source materials, particularly the comics if you can find them.
One of Friday the 13th's biggest rivals in the genre was A Nightmare on Elm Street. The series focused on the burned, knife-handed child killer Freddy Krueger, who would haunt and kill people through their dreams. The series is definitely one of the more creative of the genre, perhaps besides Evil Dead, because it just goes completely nuts exploring new ways that Freddy could kill people. But after 6 movies, the series creator, Wes Craven, came back for the 10-year anniversary, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. This is a meta-film, so it's taking place in the real world, I say with air quotes, and focuses on the actress Heather Langenkamp, who played Nancy in the first and third films, dealing with her young son's apparent haunting by Freddy from the films. The thing is that Wes Craven himself, playing himself, and Freddy Krueger's actor Robert Englund are also being haunted by something that's taken the form of Freddy Krueger and is trying to break through to the real world. This is really a smorgasbord of references and cameos to the series and sort of the genre as a whole. I think one thing that would have made this 10 out of 10 was that if Johnny Depp, who appeared in the first film and cameoed in the 6th, made an appearance in this, however brief. At this time, he was a rising star, Edward Scissorhands, funnily enough.
He was a lot more on demand at that point.
Wes Craven was apparently too nervous to actually ask him back, but apparently he would have done it, which just makes me think, that would have been...
If he came back to do number 6, this is drugs. This is your brain on drugs.
Yeah, that classic ad parody. He would have come back for this for sure.
Absolutely.
I don't think you need to watch every film, as I did, because you get a few cameos here and there from various people from across all 6 films, but you mostly just need to know who Heather, Nancy is.
You just need to know who Nancy is, who is Freddy Krueger, and what the deal is. Because I've also seen I've seen the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and it's not a parody, but it's a self-realization that it started off as this juggernaut of a horror film series, and it just teetered out, much like Friday the 13th.
There's a lot of thought put into horror films, surprisingly, in regards to plots, trying to make it all fit together. But yeah, I think this is a really good ending for the series. It puts
the horror back in the series, honestly.
It's terrifying. Freddy is terrifying, and he's this horrific monster, and cool that you have a scene where Robert Englund is playing Freddy, and it's Robert Englund, but then Robert Englund is also playing this evil Freddy who is just Freddy.
It's really scary. Really scary.
Richard Nixon there.
Yeah, a bit more Nixon than Krueger. Psychological horror, Betty Tiger, or as it is known out in the West, White Tiger. Released in 2003, it's not what I would call a traditional horror film. It is easily the horrors of war, but it comes down to the psychological aspect. Here you have a character who's just called Ivan Idonchov, which is your equivalent of a John Doe, tank crewman. And the film itself is based on a novel called The Tank Crewman, and he's survived an encounter with a tiger tank. It burns to 90% of his body, and he heals in 3 days. No memory of who he is, only that he knows how to drive a tank. And then he shows that he's might be losing his mind, or he might have a gift, because he's able to, quote, talk to tanks. The film and the book have one of those interesting relationships with fact and fiction. You can see where fact begins, but you can also see where fiction begins, and they blur the line quite easily. The Tank Crewman is based on stories from the Eastern Front, from Russian soldiers and tank commanders, while the film itself focuses on Ivan and his small team that have been assembled to hunt down this mysterious tiger tank that has been appearing out of nowhere and vanishing just as quickly, taking down rows of tanks at a time. And this is where the psychological element comes in, because you've got Ivan, he's praying to the god of tanks. His superiors are going, he's crazy, he should be in a loony bin, but yet send him to the front. And you've got this character, I can't remember his name, the Major. He sees the titular tank, the White Tiger, and he doesn't believe it. It's just, okay, so it's real. The first skirmish, they somehow manage to get the tank in front of them, they break down, and all of a sudden the tanks behind them. You should be able to hear a tank, particularly a heavy tank like the Tiger 1, move itself behind you. Some of the Germans say, yeah, we've seen it, we know it exists, and, we're using it as propaganda. Well, the rest are like, what Tiger tank? Then we mean the ones that are being recalled to the bloody Western Front? And even the Russian High Command are like, okay, the body count's real, but is the tank real?
Oh, that's interesting.
It's a psychological thriller. I liken it to Moby Dick. It's a tale of revenge.
Oh, wow. White tiger, white whale.
Coincidence?
Coincidence.
Interesting film. Recommendation for any war film fan, and even those who are interested in trying to see where reality and fiction blur.
All of my films kind of have a consistent theme as well, because my next film, Wes Craven returned 2 years later, after New Nightmare, for Scream in 1996. This is another horror film set in a world where the teenage characters know what horror films are, they know the tropes, and the killer, in this ghost-faced costume, wants to emulate those killers and knows the rules, and wants to join the ranks of those great killers. It stars Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, and Drew Barrymore. This film is more of a whodunit than a straight-up slasher. Still scared me when I did watch it the first time a few years ago.
It's a parody on old slasher films.
Yeah, there's this great scene. You got the actor Jamie Kennedy, and he plays this character who knows horror films back to front.
Rules of surviving a horror film. 1, don't go out alone. 2, don't live in a town where the police are terrible at their job.
And they're all, in the climax, they're watching a horror film together.
I think they're watching the original Halloween.
They're watching the original Halloween. But he remains while the rest of the teenagers run off. He's talking to the screen going, watch out, Jamie Lee Curtis, while he is Jamie Kennedy, with the ghost-faced killer creeping up behind him, about to stab him.
It's funny how Wes references other horror films in his films, because it was in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. I think it was Johnny Depp's character was watching either the original or the second Evil Dead film.
That's right, he was too. And I mean, The Thing from Another Planet was in the original John Carpenter film, which he, of course, went on to remake as The Thing with Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
And there's a funny joke where Rose McGowan's character goes and talks about how they're in like a Wes Carpenter movie. I think the sequel as well was pretty good, but the rest of the series goes on. It even had like a series on MTV last year.
Again, Scream turned into a parody of itself.
I think the first one really strong. Second one's pretty good as well.
Yeah.
There's a scene, especially because we work in a radio station, we're dealing with like a 3 glazed glass soundproof. There's a scene in Scream 2 which involves a soundproof room and a murder happening on one side and another character on the other, unaware that the murder is taking place.
A B-grade film, released again in 2013, Frankenstein's Army, directed by Richard Rapost. Frankenstein's Army focuses on, surprise, the Eastern Front. Oh, God, there's a theme developing. A lot of the best horrors are found on the Eastern Front. I wonder why. And it follows a small team going in ahead of the push, trying to find things. Let's just call it. They're trying to find things in order to be filmed, in order to release as propaganda for people back home. The war effort's going wonderful. They come across a small little hamlet with a large factory-esque area of it, and they find these strange beings running around, men with metal and body parts running around, some of them even screaming and only being able to not do anything else. And they find this old man, they cripple him, and they go, right, what's your business? This really goes into the far out there idea of what it is. They've taken the idea of the modern Prometheus and turned it into a house of horrors, but done in a found footage. And that's where I believe the intensity factor comes from.
This is like a first-person view almost, isn't it? Because I remember you showed me the trailer, and I'm like, wow, that's first-person. It's like the characters are directly talking to you, the audience, or rather the character who's filling in for the audience.
It swaps between 2 people, one of the members of the Ministry of Propaganda and his assistant, and they swap between holding the camera. And throughout the entire film, they speak English. Yep. Every character speaks English, but when they finally capture the old man and they find out, oh, his name's Frankenstein. The conversation is in English, but they have someone between the two acting as a translator.
Right.
So showing as if they're speaking Russian and he's speaking German, and then they're translating between the two.
That reminds me of The Hunt for Red October, which started with the Russian characters speaking Russian, and then for the convenience of the audience.
And where this movie shines is the body horror, the experiments, the creations. You've got a gas mask man with this drill bit coming out from his mask onto large pinnacle legs.
Like crutches I saw, aren't they?
Yeah, but coming
Stilts.
from his elbows.
Ooh.
They called him the Mosquito Man.
Ah.
Clamp face thing. To explain what these things look like is to do a disjustice to this film. This film is a simple plot, becomes we gotta survive and we gotta take out the other guys, but only one of them gets away. And then it becomes a little bit more lighthearted at the end, because you see the guy who got away, he's got a photo with Stalin, and he's got the hero of the Order of Lenin medal on him. To explain this film properly is to do a huge disservice. This is a body horror film and a shop of horrors.
So you sort of need to see it to believe it.
You need to see it to believe it. I would liken this maybe to the independent film of Dead Snow.
Yes.
But this takes the idea of the modern Prometheus and makes it that much more terrifying.
Final film for me today is a more mainstream film that came out a few years ago, 10 Cloverfield Lane. It stars Mary Elizabeth Winstead and John Goodman. It starts with this woman who's leaving her boyfriend, who's played by Bradley Cooper in a voice cameo. And she gets into a car crash and wakes up with her leg in a splint, and she is living in this bunker with this character played by John Goodman and this other guy. So he's convinced her that there's been this cataclysmic world-ending event and they're surviving this bunker and they're perhaps the last humans alive. And there is this tension which is always building, and you're thinking, what's really going on here? What's happening? She sees these horrific things outside the window, and this character, Michelle, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, she's like the daughter of MacGyver. She is this ingenious, like, she just builds stuff from scrap materials. She builds herself like a sort of makeshift radiation suit, which probably wouldn't really work.
No.
But uses like a shower curtain and stuff, and all these other ingenious household goods which are within this bunker. And the tension just ratchets up, and you're wondering, what's going on outside? What could this possibly be? And this film was not meant to be a Cloverfield film. Cloverfield was this 2007 big monster movie that really hinged upon, the imagery of like the Statue of Liberty's head lying on a New York street, and this mystery of where did this monster come from? What does it want? What does it want to do? 10 Cloverfield Lane was originally just this independent film, completely unconnected, and then J.J. Abrams' producer swept in and said, I want to make this a Cloverfield film and tie it to this bigger universe. Who knows where this bigger universe is going, because this doesn't really give you any answers, it just gives me more questions. And the ending is so sort of, it fits in a way. But compared to the rest of it, it's like, where does this fit? This is what is going on. It's almost Lovecraftian in its scale and kind of like, this is bonkers. But the main character, Michelle, she's absolutely amazing. It made me love the actress Mary Elizabeth Winstead. They should have made a MacGyver TV show about her, or this character just had her central rather than the remake they tried to do. Definitely give it a watch. Really tense thriller, and John Goodman is terrifying. If you love him as Walter Sobchak in The Big Lebowski, or Dan Connor in Roseanne, completely different, really good. That is our review of not only Friday the 13th for Thursday the 12th, but also a few horror films we think are pretty special. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to us.
Hopefully, and we do deeply apologise, because some of these films really need the visual medium.
And also, you've been quite evocative with the language you have used.
And I didn't get into the fun part, because that's a spoiler of why they did it.
Yeah, oh gosh. Give these films a watch. That's
Definitely give these films a watch if you're able to.
And this has been the show. This is the Geeks Review. I'm Royce.
And I'm Joshua.
And we'll see you next time. Bye for now.